you very much. First of all, let me say that I'm always astounded in this committee and the Foreign Relations Committee with the volume of issues that we have to deal with. I think your opening statement, Director Coates, indicated how difficult this is to process all this and to deal with all this. And your statement, for the record, that all of you joined in, again lays this out for us. It tells us the kind of volume that we have to deal with, and we're certainly only going to scratch the surface here today. But I want to focus on something that doesn't get as much focus as I think it should. We see in these days, every time we pick up media or turn on TV, they're talking about Russia and Russia's ham-handed efforts to affect things in the world. And certainly it's a concern. But in my judgment, and I think many others, the real concern is China. We're approaching the end of the first fifth of the 21st century, and if we've learned anything, it's the last few decades have convinced us that China in the 21st century, as we proceed through it, is going to be a major competitor of ours in every way that there is, obviously economically, militarily, culturally, and in every other way. And look, this is going to happen. We're living in the 21st century. That communications and transportation are so different than what they were, and we as the United States are going to wind up having to compete like we never have before with a gorilla that's starting to get to be about the same size we are. And as a result of that, we're going to have to learn to deal with that. The thing I really want to focus on is how we're going to deal with that. We're Americans. We've always competed. We can compete. We innovate. We create. We manufacture. We do the great things that we do that have really led the world. But we can only do it if we're operating under a rule of law. And that is something that is greatly missing at the present time as China tries to compete with us. The poster child for me is a local company we have in Idaho, Micron Technology. Most of you have heard of them. They're the second largest manufacturer of memory in the world. And they have had a recent case where Chinese nationals stole intellectual property and then took it back to China and are now suing Micron in China through a state-owned entity in a state-owned court in front of a state-owned judge. And this is the kind of thing that we just can't have. I had a spirited discussion with the Chinese ambassador about this as he attempted to defend the undefendable. And his suggestion was that, well, things aren't as advanced in China as they are here. Well, I get that. They've come a long ways in a few decades. But if we're gonna do this and keep the world order in right side up, China's going to have to develop their rule of law and live by it much better than what they have recently. We just saw again the indictments against the Huawei official, and in defense of the Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, and others, they've indicted these Chinese people that have affected Micron. And the question I have for you is, after listening to the Chinese ambassador, I'm not wholly convinced that their efforts are going to be as robust as they need to be to get China right side up when it comes to the rule of law. And when I'm talking about the rule of law, I don't mean just covert theft, but I mean what I call overt theft, and that is where they require businesses, as we all know, to divulge their information before they can do business in China, and then having the kind of restrictions they have on them in China. And all of this causes us real difficulty as we attempt to compete. Director Coates, I wonder if you could address that or assign it to somebody there at your panel. I'm looking for what do we see in the future, number one, and number two, how can we try to get our arms around this to do something about it?
Well,